Right. Joining us on the line right now is a WWE Hall of Famer, an NWA Hall of Famer, the greatest play-by-play announcer of all time. He is good old JR himself, Jim Ross. Jim Ross, welcome back to the Two-Man Power Trip.
Oh, thanks, John. Always good talking to you.
You are kind of talking to us at one of the craziest times ever, pretty much in the history of life during this whole pandemic, right? I mean, it's just absolutely insane what's going on out there right now.
Yeah. Our society's in a mess. You know, we've got to all be smart. It's as simple as staying home. It's as simple as staying home. And those issues with 6 million people applying for unemployment or whatever it is frightening. So the 15 or 20, where it was, whatever the number was on the WWE issues of April 15th, they're not meaningless by any stretch, but they really pale by comparison to a much bigger and more serious situation.
Oh, big time. And it's just like, what a crazy, crazy world. Like you mentioned, the releases yesterday from the WWE, so many. I think it was 30-plus talent, something like that. Is that just a hard situation as far as you've been in that situation where you've had to lay off people and talent relations? Is that just an impossible situation to kind of gather yourself through?
Yeah, there's no fun in it whatsoever. It's the worst thing you can do in that role is to tell somebody that's worked all their life to get to the WWE, and they grew up watching it. They want to be a star. They want to be a great, like their predecessors. To tell them that their dream for now is over, and that's really how I look at this situation with these talents. They just got to use this as the opportunity to reset. This is not the end of the world. This is not the worst thing that's going to happen in their career. It's not the worst hand they're going to be dealt in their lifetime. But they got to regroup. They got to stay positive. Don't burn any bridges. Be smart, and try to create. If I'm unemployed, I'm going to be coming up with ideas with the existing companies that might use me down the road, and try to give them some ideas on how I can best be utilized. Help them do a little bit of the creative. But it's a sad day for those guys, and to me, John, quite frankly, it's an even sadder day that we have to talk about the death of Howard Finkel, the first ever employee at WWE, a great friend. Nobody loved pro wrestling that I've ever met more than the Fink. He passed away at 69, and it's just he was a fixture there. And in my run, my 26 years there, Howard was very, very prevalent, always accommodating, a genuinely nice guy, and sometimes one might say that he loved wrestling too much. I don't know. I could be accused of that myself. So Howard's loss is felt by all of us, and God bless him. And I covered the last time I got to see him and hug him at a WrestleMania, not a few years ago. But he's been in bad health. God bless him. So poor Howard, and I'm sad to think that he's not going to be around anymore.
Yeah, that was such a sad thing to kind of wake up to this morning. That to think on top of everything else, the voice of definitely my childhood for sure, and the greatest announcer to me. As far as doing the ring announcing is definitely the Fink. So memorable, just a epic, iconic voice too, right? I mean, he's paired so well with so many of the great moments in WWF history.
Oh yeah, you can't hear an introduction of any big match for seemingly generations that didn't have Howard's voice attached to it. So Howard was the best ring announcer that I've ever worked with. And I worked with a lot of real good ones. Our Justin Roberts down at AEW is a great young ring announcer. Gary Capetta. I love working with Gary Capetta. He was a consummate pro. But Howard, to me, it starts and ends with Howard right now, as far as ring announcers are concerned. He can have the pride that in the business he loves so dearly, he became the very best at what he did, and that was ring announcing. Nobody was better.
And new that everyone kind of stole and uses now, and you always hear he invented that. I mean, it's pretty cool that he's an innovator too.
Yeah, he was. It stuck, so it got over, and
yeah,
it's been over for since a lot of people before some of your listeners were even born. He established his body of work. He lived his dream, and thank God for that. But it's sure going to be sad to think that he's no longer with us.
Absolutely. What's kind of your most favorite moment of him from maybe your WWF days? Do you have anything that kind of sticks out of maybe behind the scenes, or it could be in front of the camera as well?
Oh, there's so many memories of Howard. Howard was before the social media craze, before podcasting, before all the Twitter and all the other social media stuff. Howard was a devout reader. He consumed a lot of information on the newsletters. So when something would come up or Howard would think would be newsworthy, you could always expect a knock on your door. And the other thing, I remember one conversation with him, Howard loved to come give you the bad news as well. And he came to my door, knocked on my door, and I was right in the middle of something. Had my door open, as I usually did. But he came to my door, knocked on my door, and I've been working on payroll, something that was tedious and I need to be really paying attention to, meticulous information. He knocked on my door. I saw my peripheral vision, it's the pink. I said, all right, Howard, who died? Well, I didn't want to break the news, but but that was his role. I'm not saying the role was bad by any stretch, but Howard did all kinds of things, keeping up with the business in general, following all the trends that what people were booking, who's getting over, all these type things. So Howard was a real student of the game, but I always expect that knock on the door, and every day, he would bring me the New York Post and the Daily News to my office. Now, he bought them for himself at 5 o'clock in the morning on his way to work, because Howard would be at work at 6 or 7. And you could always tell that he'd had breakfast over, because you'd find a little piece of egg over here or a bagel, a piece of mirror here and there. And so, but I didn't say anything to him about it, but you knew that Fink had breakfast reading the paper. And then when he got through reading the paper, he brought him to good old JR, and I enjoyed those two New York City papers when I was living in Connecticut. So a lot of great. Howard, just a friend and so accommodating. He wanted to be loved so much. Like I said, the happy news about Howard was he was no more than or no less than me or you or any other fan listening. Howard was able to live his dream in his dream job. And to be able to say that is pretty amazing. We're lucky that we all can say that. So when I'm gone, people are going to say, well, JR did what he loved doing for a long time. So his life was good. And that's how I look at my life. And I'm sure at the end of the day, Howard probably felt the same satisfaction that he accomplished something amazing. He went in the Hall of Fame. He was the first employee ever at WWE. That'll never be taken away from him. Ironically hired on April Fool's Day. He used to joke about that. So did Vince. But, well, it's just coincidental, But Howard was a valuable member of the team there. But I loved him. He's a real good person. Really was. Really a good human being. In a business that's not overtly known for its good people sometimes. Howard was always, his heart was always in the right place. And nobody loved pro wrestling more than Howard Finkel.
Now, you mentioned the releases and all that kind of stuff going down. Pretty shocking. There's so many guys. Obviously, some guys will be furloughed, and whenever they kind of start events again, like I'm sure the producers and agents will be headed back there. But since there's no real shows going on except for the Performance Center shows, they may not be needed. But as far as the talent, were you surprised at any of this particular or specific talent that was released from WWE?
Oh yeah, of course. They released a lot of people with high skill sets who had here, and one of the reasons that they were released, one has to think, is that the creative that they were provided didn't click. So that means that they still have the same skill set today. If they're put into the right position with the right company, they can be effective. That's what they need to remember. If I'm a guy like Heath Slater or Rusev, for example, EC3, and there's all these other guys. There's a lot of other guys. I'm just going off the top of my head. I don't have the list in front of me. Then they need to be willing to repackage themselves. They need to be ready to. How can I make myself better? How can I get a different presentation? What ideas do I have? Here's what I always wanted to do. Well, in certain companies like AEW, for example, if you get the opportunity to do that, and you get the opportunity to cut your own promos, because in AEW we don't have any writers. So, they just got to be willing to reinvent and hit that reset button, and whatever they do, don't give up on wrestling. Don't be mad at the mistress. You kind of knew what you're getting into when you got this somewhat volatile business of entertainment and sports. You're no different than an NFL guy. Who would have thought that Tom Brady was going to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer?
Right.
So things happen in all of walks of life, and this business is not immune to that.
It is crazy, like you mentioned, like some of those guys, if you think about it, like, wow, how did they not find something creative for them, or how did they not click? Just off the top of my head, I was just thinking like Rusev immediately. I'm like, how the hell did they? I mean, he just seems like a perfect kind of bread and butter WWE guy, but right, I guess sometimes it just doesn't click.
Yeah, we don't know what all went on behind the scenes there. Was he challenging to do business with? I have no idea. I've never heard that. But he'd be a guy in the right position that could do very, very well because he's very skilled. He's worked on his body. Every time I've met him, he's been nothing but totally respectful and polite and professional. Not a kiss ass, but very respectful in a manly way. And I always appreciate it. You can see through the phony guys, but he's not a phony guy. So he'll be fine. And it may be, this may be a good omen for some of these guys. He said, how do you figure that? Well, you get a chance to reset, and you get a chance to reintroduce your product. Remember, John, these guys are independent contractors, and they're entrepreneurs above all things. They're entrepreneurs. So, using that entrepreneurial spirit, are you willing to repackage your product? Are you willing to have a new approach to your product? Advertisers, marketers, entrepreneurs do it every single day. And so now, instead of waiting on somebody to come give you an idea, or waiting on somebody to come give you your lines for a promo, you can start creating that content on your own. And so it'll be fun to see where everybody lands, and then how they are brought in, wherever they're brought in. But people say, well, they can go to New Japan. Well, New Japan's not working now either.
Right.
So, we're all dealing with it. I've been on the road in 3 weeks. I voiced over Moxley and Hager here in Norman at a little audio studio, rather. So we're not traveling. I'm not going to travel until they're somewhat all clear, because I'm 68. My two granddaughters on Easter Sunday lost their other grandpa to the coronavirus. He was about 5 years older than me, but you think I'm going to get on an airplane or 2 or 3 to go to work when this stuff is still prevalent? No, I'm not going to do it. And the great news is that for me, I have the full support of Tony Khan, the owner of AEW, who called me 3 weeks ago and said, this is too dangerous, JR. I cannot afford to lose you. I do not want you to get sick. So we'll figure out things for you to do. But in the meantime, hunker down. And that's what I've done. So it's just the world we live in right now is nothing like it was 6 months ago. And it may never be that way again. Somebody told me yesterday that if students are not allowed back in their classrooms, specifically talking about high school or college, then there will be no football this fall. And you start thinking about, well, I didn't want to think of that because I dreaded to hear those words. But if fans can't attend en masse, sitting close together in those 18-inch seats, there's not going to be any sports, at least the people in the stands. And I don't know that some leagues are going to want to do that. I don't have a clue. But it's going to be our world is changing forever. But I will tell you this. Those wrestlers, men and women, officials, everybody, their world did not end yesterday. It did not end yesterday. It just gives them a chance to step back, exhale, reset if you choose to. So, Conrad Thompson and I did a new podcast this morning, as you and I are talking, early this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Connie gets up early. And Connie, I kidding Conrad, he and I are like the McGuire twins of podcasting, the world's largest podcast team. I said, the reason you like to get up so damn early is that you can't wait to eat breakfast. Like me, I'm ready to roll, man. I'm ready to eat. But we did a show this morning on the paywall side of our business, talking about all these people. And, Rusev was very prominent in our conversation, and how these guys can repackage themselves, how they can readjust their thinking, or they can give up and get out of the business. You've got to do something to make your situation better as a performer, as an athlete, your look, your conditioning, all that stuff. And think about how I can be more valuable. How can I make myself more valuable to my next employer so that this doesn't happen to me again?
Great point. Very, very true. They definitely have the potential there. It's just that they got to stay positive and kind of do it themselves, so to speak. DIY. They just got to get out there and like you said, reinvent themselves, or almost bring something out of them that they didn't show the WWE.
Yeah, that's it. They got to be effort put into it. They got to get over the grieving period, man. I could speak from that personal experience. Somehow, some way, you got to battle through to the other side, never forgetting your loved ones that have left you. But you got to move on. We have to move on. I have to move on. We all have to move on when we suffer these losses. And to lose a job is not like losing a loved one. Losing your dream child, my God, I want this, and now it's over. It's just over. Get over it. Grow up. Stand up, man. How many times in my career have I been knocked on my ass? You have the option. You can lay there and grovel, or you can get your ass up and try to improve your condition. And I've always looked at it that way, and they should too, quite frankly. So I'm not being callous and hard here, but the reality of it is losing a wife or losing your children's grandfather or your grandchildren's grandfather, something like that. That's a whole lot more poignant than losing your gig. So, what about those other 6 million people in America that are on unemployment, as we mentioned? It's crazy, man. So, it's not the end of the world. It's the inevitabilities of being a publicly traded company. They said at the very beginning, when you become a publicly traded company, it's a blessing and a curse. And we're seeing now, because of the numbers game, that it is a curse for 30 people, as you mentioned, John. I didn't even know how many it was. But it's kind of a curse. But It's also the fact that, look at the other side of the coin. Look at how many talents that they retained that are making millions of dollars for part-time work. That's an issue. So all this stuff to me, I might be wrong here, and it sounds like I'm bitching and moaning about it. I'm not. But quite frankly, what was the motivation, John, in your view, of why WWE signed all these people, paid them really good money, and they never had to wait on their checks? The money was always there, but the talents themselves because of the payday, they allowed their growth to stop because they were not being used.
Yes.
What was the reason? What was the reason, in your view, of signing all these talents? What would you think?
Well, I think they signed a bunch of people so that, like World of Sport in UK, you take away that, you take away guys from AEW, take away, so they could be the only game in town and almost compete against themselves and have all these guys. And that kind of right now looks like it's backfiring because they signed too many guys.
Well, yeah, obviously. To stymie the growth of other companies is not. I don't know how good of motivation that is. I don't know how good of game plan that is. So, but they've got a lot of talents who are making and looking for them. Hey, I applaud them, man. Good for them. They're making millions of dollars, and some of them multi-millions of dollars, and they're part-time. They're part-time hands. So I don't know. There's a lot more looking at it. The conference call for the financials is next Thursday, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And one would think, one would assume, assumption is probably the better word, that between now and then, that there may be other developments that could include more talents or could include other things to reduce costs, reduce overhead. So that's what they're trying to do right now. WWE is trying to reduce overhead. And sometimes it's heartbreaking, it's gut-wrenching, but for whatever reasons, and I'm not the bean counter there, nothing like that, you got to wonder, how did it get in this condition? And if you're saying, well, it's the virus, we can't do house shows, we can't do live events, I get all that. But I think it's got a lot to do with that, but I also think it has a lot to do just with mathematics.
Yeah, absolutely. Too many guys. And it looks like with all these releases, the estimate is they're saving like $4 million a month by releasing all these people right now. So it's like, whew, crazy that the bottom line is kind of the way it is. But I guess that's business, unfortunately.
Well, when you're signing guys to come back and work part-time, making, as rumored, $3 million a year, $4 million a year, pardon me, you got to evaluate that too.
Yeah, true. No offense to guys like Edge or whatever, but I don't know if he's worth kind of $3 million a year on a part-time schedule like that.
Well, it's a very subjective theory. I signed him. I love the guy.
Yep.
I truly do. He's like he'd probably be embarrassed to say, I connected real good with his mother. We both love the Eagles. His little backstory, a nephew or something. Him and Jay Wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We didn't pay them nothing when they started, but we got them for what we could get them for. They were happy to get it because I said, you're not going to make a lot of money with this contract. This is not the contract you want to live with, but you're getting a jersey, man. You're getting in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now go play. So and they were great in the camps and so forth, but they were talented indie wrestlers before I hired them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I don't know. But point being is, whether it be Edge or any other nameless talent that's making millions of dollars for part-time work, I admire the fact that they're getting it. I hope that they're doing two things: saving most of it and paying their taxes. The taxes will never go away. You got to wonder the panic that some of these talents have because, have they paid their taxes? Or, oh man, what am I going to do now? I was counting that next check to do this. Or, I want to finish this my bathroom remodeling or whatever, financially or emotionally. The financial side is no one's fault but the talents, and the emotional side is probably how we would all respond under these circumstances.
Right. He's kind of just the first name I just thought of the top of my head. I mean, obviously it's Goldberg, Undertaker. I mean, there's a bunch of other part-timers making millions and millions. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent there that they're paying a lot of money to that aren't working full-time schedules. There's no doubt about that. Yeah,
and who knows that they're, like we see pro sports doing it all the time. They renegotiate contracts. It's not illegal. It's not immoral.
Right.
It's just standard business for in a lot of areas. So that could happen. Bottom line is, getting laid off is not the end of the day. It's not the end of your life. It is if you do nothing about it. It is if you don't try to improve your lot in life. It is. It's a big deal. But if you're willing to stand up, dust yourself off, say to hell with this bump in the road, that's all it is, I am going to hit the reset button. And by God, I'm going to come back better than ever. I'm going to have a little bit different presentation. I'm going to get in a situation in a company that will allow me to be creative with my own self. If they think of it that way, then most of those guys, if they keep their attitudes good, will come out on top. I really believe that. They'll find work. And look, it may be that some of them say, well, I was thinking about doing something else. There you go. Now's the time. So it's just a tough time. It really is. And I don't know what more we can say about it.
Years, because I really want to talk to you about this because I just talked to Vince Russo not too long ago about this, probably last week, all about the Brawl for All and Dark Side of Ring documentary, which you were on a couple times, but really the Brawl for All episode. What did you kind of make of about the whole thing? I don't know. Did you watch it all the way through? Did you see from the beginning to the end of the documentary?
Yeah, I saw it. Well, it's the same thing I said on the show. I was very honest. No one got over. That's where my perspective comes from. Not, well, it did a good quarter hour. or it was a good TV product, or those things. There were losses in that process that were unnecessary to have happen. It was a bad idea, in my opinion. And so this ain't J.R. lashing out with Vince Russo. My God, how many times can we ride that horse? You know, I don't have any ill will toward Vince Russo whatsoever. We just didn't have the same philosophy oftentimes on Wrestling Creative. That's it. So big deal. We disagreed. It's not like Twitter today when you disagree, when you give an opinion, then automatically you're assaulted because your opinion didn't agree with the person responding's opinion. And so you're an idiot. And he's right. That's a bad trend here in our society. So I wanted somebody to get over, or 2 or 3 guys to get over. Nobody got over. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. It just didn't work. That's all. It didn't work. And I think it was one of the worst ideas I've ever been involved in because of the casualties, the injuries. You can't just blow off when somebody gets hurt and you got to have surgery. We have a lot of guys that are hurt. A lot of guys that had issues, physical issues, after that competition. So tell me how can anybody say, realistically, well, it was a good idea? You can make a case for that, then have at it. It's just you're going to have a hard time convincing me of that.
What about not Vince Russo? What about Vince McMahon? It seems like something that'd be right up his alley. He's wrestling Kurt Angle on the flights. He's trying to fight Brock Lesnar. He seems like he would love to find out who the toughest guy in the locker room is, right? I mean, Vince McMahon himself.
Well, he's an alpha male. He probably would. But still, nobody foresaw that we're going to have a litany of injuries. There was no precedent. Well, the last time we had a brawl for it all, we had 3 surgeries, 2 concussions, and whatever. Well, we haven't had a brawl for it all. This is no different than Bill Watts or Ole Anderson or any of these guys, or alpha male owners, bookers, decision makers. Sure, everybody, it's always fascinating who's the baddest guy in the locker room. Or I wonder how this would go if it was a real fight. So, I don't lay that on Vince whatsoever. I mean, you can lay everything on Vince if you choose to. That's real convenient and uncreative, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But we all bought in. I announced it. I didn't like it, but I was a team player, and we bought in to support what the owner wanted to do, as we did everything. So that was my MO there. So, and it's also not right for everybody to pile on Russo this damn thing. I mean, there were a lot of people involved that could have said something, but if one person didn't want to do it or wanted to do it, it wouldn't have mattered what the group said. And nobody, and a lot of people, I was intrigued by the idea, but it was a cluster. And it just, again, at the end of the day, if you don't try to always get talent over, you can forget about those minute-by-minute ratings because they ain't going to happen.
And the thing that really I didn't like about it was the rules, or the kind of what they presented as the rules. The boxing gloves, I mean, that's okay, but it's probably better off with the MMA gloves, right? I mean, it was, to be honest, not to make excuses for Dan Severn or Dr. Death or anything, but those guys are wrestlers. They need their hands. They should be able to grip guys and wrestle.
Yeah, but again, John, no precedent. We can all analyze it very intelligently today, 2020, right?
Yep.
We can all be experts. Oh, I'm a genius. I look back at it, well, you could have done that. Of course we could have. But again, it was we're traveling a new road. It's like this damn virus, man. Oh, we're going to open up by May 1st. Well, you're an idiot. You have no clue you're going to open up. I saw yesterday where 600 more people died in New York. We had 8 die yesterday in Oklahoma, in our little wide spot in the road. This is not over, and nobody knows when it's going to be over. The Brawl for All was an entity that was created that had never been done before. So all of a sudden it gets a big check mark by the box. New. First time ever. All that stuff. But nobody could foresee the rash of injuries that we had.
It's crazy. And nobody kind of foresaw Bart Gunn winning it either, which is like crazy. Just if you just look at all the guys, he was probably one of the underdogs for sure.
Bart Gunn's one of the nicest guys we ever had on our roster. And I really feel badly that he's been convinced apparently that there was a conspiracy going on where Dr. Death was going to be he was the anointed winner of a shoot. Figure that out, and that the winner was going to get a run with Austin. That was never discussed. That's wrong. Bruce Pritchard and I were instrumental in bringing Doc in, and we thought, well, maybe the old doctor, after all his bumps and bruises, is past his prime, but we love the guy. He was great to be around in the locker room. He had a great reputation. We thought, well, maybe, just maybe, like we did with Mick Foley, pairing him with the Undertaker when the consensus was don't hire Mick Foley, and then all of a sudden he gets for the Undertaker and they make magic time and time again, and Mick's career is launched. Well, I didn't know if we could catch lightning in the bottle the second time, but we thought, well, maybe Dr. Death would have an interesting run, a program, shoot the angle, build it, blow it off program with Austin, because Austin was like our Bruno. When you have a babyface territory, as a booker, you're obligated to have a heel factory. If you're going to invest all this money and all this time and all this effort into your star champion, and he's a babyface, you better not screw yourself and your talent by not having opponents ready to step in to work with that person on an ongoing basis. Just like back in the day, I was telling somebody this. I think Conrad talked about this in our podcast. WWE would bring WWF would bring in guys that were, Skandar Akbar was brought in to have a one garden run with Bruno. And Skandar Akbar in the little Oklahoma territory was a part-time main eventer, semi-main eventer, manager, but he certainly wasn't the best heel we had. And I love the guy, don't get me wrong. And he's 5'9", big, thick. Well, he went to the TVs in Allentown or wherever it was while he was still working for a cowboy. And then Bruno got his neck broken by Stan Hansen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that killed the push of Akbar. But my point is, WWF is bringing guys who are middle cards, skills, safe workers, solid workers, good locker room guys, like Akbar was, and they would get a win, and then finally promo, boom, Bruno. So, and you hope to get, Cowboy told me that your goal was to get one in the garden with Bruno, which is a big thing. And Watts got 3 with him. So, because Bruno liked Cowboy was a 300-pound heel that could relievably beat Bruno, at least in the eyes of the fans. So, I don't know where we were on that thing, but nonetheless, it's just guys can be repackaged, they can be rebuilt, but these guys that are now available, they should think for themselves. How can I make myself better? How can I make myself valuable to Ring of Honor? I'll give them some ideas. Bing, bing, bing. How can I make myself valuable to MLW? Here's some ideas. How can I make myself valuable to AEW, national TV show? I get back on the map quick if I can hit. Well, why don't you think about hitting? Why don't you think about how you're going to improve those hits? How you get your batting average up? How you going to reinvent? There's where we are right now, John. It's that simple. And I sound cold and callous because I'm a former EVP of that department and had to deal with this stuff. But it's not the end of the world. It's just not.
How do you think about AEW and what's going on? I know you said you obviously did the voiceover last night for Moxley and Hager's main event for AEW, but how do you feel about how they're handling the whole situation?
Great. What more can we do? Go dark? That's one alternative. Go dark. Mm-hmm. Or you continue to do what you're doing. If you've got better ideas on how to get first-run wrestling programming on TV other than what we're doing, I'm sure Tony Khan would love to have a chat with you. I don't know what more we can do. I don't know what more we can do. Quite frankly, I think they're doing a good job. I think having some of the talents at ringside just to have a little ambiance is a good idea, a real good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We didn't do that with Mox and Hager, but that's not my call. I didn't. Not saying I would have. Probably wouldn't. They wanted. If those guys came to Tony Khan and said, we want to do a legitimate, authentic, old-school, empty arena match, then give them the benefit of the doubt and give it a try. And that's what he did. And I thought those guys worked their asses off. He showed you how tough both those men were. They're on concrete more than they're not. They're laying their punches in. They work snug. You can hear flesh on flesh. But again, in our society, it'll be overanalyzed. Oh, well, I thought, well, here's what I'd have done. No, you would have done shit. You would have done that because you're not in a position to do anything. So don't, what would be your solution? You'll get a lot of problem identifiers in this world, especially on social media, but very few of them are along those solutions.
I feel like Moxley, if you really look at it and look at like the releases and stuff, he would be like the prototypical example of like, all right, maybe he obviously wasn't released because his contract expired, but like the situation where it's like, I'm going to go somewhere else and the grass can be greener on the other side, because he's been, I think, a bigger star in AEW and he's been booked brilliantly. His promos have been better. Everything about him, I feel like he's really stepped up his game in AEW.
Because the system allows the talents to grow. The system in AEW allows the talents to aggressively contribute to their own creative. It's that simple. He had a score to settle. He had a chip on his shoulder. He's probably always had a chip on his shoulder. John Moxley's the closest thing to Stone Cold since Stone Cold. He resonates with the people. He's got a very unique aura about him. I think he's a perfect individual to be the face of AEW right now. And so, and that's what guys are hearing. That's one of the reasons, that Luke Harper, which is not Luke Harper anymore, as we know.
Brody Lee, yep.
Oh, yeah, Brody. Brody came back in great shape, looking good, great gear, physical, athletic, big man. And there's always a desire for those. So, but they get to call some of their own plays. They get to work on their own promos. They don't have a 20 or 30-something-year-old writer who's not had that many life experiences telling what they should say in a fighting tone. Entertainment tone, comedy tone, different deal. But in a wrestling side, of the wrestling vernacular of that matter, writers are not sometimes your greatest friends. But the guys like Fit Finley are your greatest friends. But Dean Malenko, Jerry Lynn. We got the work that Jerry Lynn and Dean Malenko do in AEW is never discussed much by the public, but those guys are invaluable to our company. Coaches, that's what they were called. They're not producers or agents, they're coaches.